The 30 to 20. Gates with a goal!
And welcome to our season year in review episode of Ponies All Access. I'm Ted LaRue. I've braved the elements on the state championship softball field here. We're doing anything and everything to bring you Ponies All Access here before we get too deep into summer. And what a year for Pony Athletics. 5 team state titles, 15 section champions. It was unbelievable what this Stillwater area high school sports program was able to do throughout the year. Fall, winter, and spring, they were able to get a lot of success out of their teams this season. We welcome in Stu Grosskreutz, the sports editor at the Stillwater Gazette. Appreciate you joining us for this episode of Ponies All Access.
Yeah, happy to be here.
And first we're going to talk about the fall season, and when you kind of compare the 3 seasons, maybe the fall a little bit on the short end of the stick considering they didn't win any state championships. We'll start with boys soccer though in the fall. They came that close to winning a state championship against Wayzata. This was kind of a team, lost a few guys coming into this season. Was it a surprise to you they made it all the way back to the state title?
I think even Coach Smothers would admit that, just based on what they lost from the year before. In a lot of ways, it was maybe even more gratifying for this group and the kids that did come back. And obviously, they benefit from what occurred the year before. I think there's some confidence that goes with that. And I think it was a little more of a surprise, yeah.
When we take a look at this fall season right now, and from top to bottom, football team struggling just a little bit right now. Is boys soccer have they kind of worked themselves way up to the premier kind of program of the fall season?
Well, hard to argue with football, but I mean soccer. They've not had a losing season since I think 1982. Right. So it's for some of the programs at Stillwater like boys soccer. It's a bigger story if they don't win a section title or a conference title. They've just been so rock solid for so long, and I guess I just don't see any reason that won't continue. But I mean, if you're at the state finals the last 2 years, I mean, big crowds there. They get big crowds for some of their rivalry section games. North St. Paul especially. They've had some great games at Pony Stadium. So yeah, I think a lot of people are excited about it.
What can we expect from this boys soccer team next year? They're losing, Jorge Malone is going to be gone, a few other guys. What can we expect? Still that upper echelon of success, you think, next year?
Yeah, well, I don't think they go into any season not expecting to contend for conference and section titles. They've got a good program in place. They've got a large JV program. They've got 100 plus kids in the entire program. So you've got a lot of kids to choose from, and they're in a situation where their tough decisions are always, you can only carry so many on varsity. So I don't expect them to ever really drop off.
Going back to a team that did make it to the state tournament, the volleyball team, head coach Bob Fisher and this squad, how do we gauge them? Were you kind of surprised they made that run towards the state tournament and won the section title there over North St. Paul?
I don't think anybody was terribly surprised. They lost in 5 games the year prior to that. They had a lot of good athletes coming back. The one thing I think we forgot about with last year's team, as good as things finished up, was one of their best players, Maddie Whittington, who was, I think, all conference as a freshman. She'll be very highly recruited. She's a difference maker, and you put her on that team, and now you're really talking about more of an even state title contender, I think, last year.
And we wrap things up in the fall season with, of course, the football team, probably the most talked about team here on campus at Stillwater Area High School. Disappointing season at 2-7. But what can they take from the season kind of going forward here? Now, senior quarterback Mark Retker, of course, will graduate. What can we expect here going forward towards 2018?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, when I talk to people, that's usually the question I get is, how's the football team going to be? And that's usually what a lot of people are interested in. Quarterback play is going to be important to be able to improve upon 2-7. You look at it and you couldn't just say, there wasn't a lot of close losses. Or, you look at a lot of things Stillwater has been really good at. Mm-hmm. Special teams, defense, power running, that type of thing. And a lot of that they just struggled to establish last year. Like I said, special teams has been something they hang their hat on, and that just wasn't quite up to their level. And a lot of those things just kind of added up. They had some tough injuries. They did have some inexperience. Their line is pretty solid, but they just couldn't quite put that consistent effort. They had that big win against Mounds View where everything seemed to be clicking that night, including special teams. Yep. and they just weren't quite able to sustain that for the rest of the season. And at that level, against a tough schedule, against big schools and good schools from their crossover teams, that's just really tough to do.
Now, we mentioned the guys kind of going away. You got Mark Retker, who's graduating, but you've got guys like Cooper Urey, he's coming back, a couple of defenders, they're going to come back as well. What are your kind of expectations? You got White Bear Lake and Mounds View at home, the teams they beat on the road last year, but St. Michael Albertville comes here, they're going to be tough. You got Blaine on the road. What can we expect here from Stillwater football?
But really for Stillwater, it comes down to playing defense and power running game. They've got a good solid line coming back. So it's going to come down to a lot of that stuff.
A solid fall season. When we come back at Ponies All Access, we'll take a look at the winter season as well as we'll welcome in Mike Peter. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back to Ponies All Access. We're done with the fall. Let's recap this winter season. And with that, we bring in Mike Peter, who is joining us from Target Field in Minneapolis, taking a little bit of a break from his daily activities to kind of give us some feedback. And Mike, one of your specialties was this girls basketball team from start to finish. This was a team that maybe surprised a lot of people, but would you say expectations were met for girls basketball this year?
I would say they were met in a big way. At the start of the year, we find out Alexis Pratt joined the team, and something Stillwater hadn't had much of is depth and scoring threats. The previous year, Stillwater was averaging about 58 points a game, and the year before that, they were averaging 50. This past year, they were averaging close to 66, which ranked in the top 5 in Class 4A. Willie Taylor really has emphasized creating offense for this team, and I guess that's a way to win games, is scoring more points than the opponents. There was a little bit of a letdown in sections, but again, Stillwater mostly a two-person team in terms of dynamic players. But that being said, we got a glimpse of what could be an outstanding team a year from now.
And one big story for this girls basketball team in the offseason was the commitment of Sarah Scalia to Lindsay Whalen's University of Minnesota Golden Gophers. So she's already wrapped up her college commitment. How do you anticipate that affecting this team this next season?
I think it will be tough to measure until we can get to next season, but she's had a great AAU campaign. Her North Tartan team won the state championship. Eliza Carlin happens to be one of her teammates, along with Franny Hottinger. And I think what this news about Sarah Scalia is going to do, it will bring more attention to Stillwater, and it may encourage some of the younger kids who maybe have been involved in traveling to consider playing for the Ponies. That's something her dad has spoke a lot of when I've talked to him at Stillwater games, is building up the youth. That's something Stillwater hasn't had at their disposal compared to the superpowers like Hopkins, Eastview over the last few years. So in terms of immediate impact, I don't think you're going to see a lot there, but knowing that Sarah Scalia is going to be a Gopher, in a sport that doesn't produce a lot of D1 recruits, that's going to inspire a lot of kids in the Stillwater.
And welcome back here, Stu, to the program here on Ponies All Access. And we're continuing on with the winter sports with the boys hockey team, which has risen to one of the top teams. Have made runs to the state tournament the last few years. This year, floating around that 500 mark. And, they kind of graduated 15 seniors the year before. A younger team this year. What was kind of your take on this season? Is eventually, they ended up falling there in second.
Yeah, I mean, really there weren't a lot of surprises. Just they graduated, 15 or so seniors from a team that really had taken the program to new heights. Yeah. But now it's more, there's a long time there where it wasn't an expectation, but after the last 5 or 6 years where the section finals is really kind of where they're expecting to, contend for conference and be more consistently competitive. They've got a lot of good young talent coming back. All that experience is going to pay off. It's a little bit like this year's softball team where, they just replaced so many kids, and they had a regular season that was inconsistent. They looked really good at times, then they showed some youth at times. and just weren't quite able to put it together at the end. But they were there and competitive, and I don't see why that wouldn't carry over into this coming season.
From the boys hockey team to the girls hockey team, boy, you talk about youth. You talk a lot about a lot of people coming back. This girls hockey, three or four seniors.
Yep.
I believe only graduate now. Olivia Knox is a big one in net.
The one senior you'd like to have back, I think. But that's where their experience was on defense last year. They struggled to score goals, and especially consistently. And that's just, it's just hard to win 2-1 hockey games a lot, which is what they were kind of forced to do. But yeah, and the fun thing about a lot of those girls hockey players is you've seen them have success in lacrosse, softball. There's some on that state championship softball team. And I think that only helps. It builds confidence, and those kids going through the ringer with some of those sports, that's only going to help for hockey, and I think the future is bright for them.
We continue on in the winter season with our first state champion here, the mentioned on the program, and that is the gymnastics team. And just how impressive was it to kind of see it wire to wire for Stillwater to be on top all year long?
They were just rock solid, and it was, going into the state meet, you just don't know what's going to happen, and really going into the final event, which is where they won it. But they had a lot of those kids that have been in the program, been with the program. Danielle Kieran, Lauren Thole, a couple of the seniors that have been just rock solid for many years. And so it was one of those where you kind of thought they had a chance, but and having been there the year before, I think really helped them. Kind of having been through that experience, I think is something where when you do it the first time at the state meet, you can talk about it and prepare for it, but it's still difficult.
The state championships just kept on coming. Alpine and Nordic bringing home state championships as well. We'll start with them first. They had a little bit of inspiration across the globe. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but this was a team. Bill Simpson's been doing it for such a long time at such a high level. This seems like no surprise, right?
Yeah, he's everybody's Hall of Famer. I mean, they've named a race after him. I mean, he's just a legend, and he works with a lot of the younger kids, and that's one of the reasons why they have 140 kids in that program every year. So yeah, it's something. I know they're the envy of lots of schools and communities, just with the support system they have in place.
Their inspiration, of course, was the hometown hero, 2010 graduate from Stillwater Area High School, Jessie Diggins. Ended up the first gold medal in United States women's skiing history. Just unbelievable. I mean, it gives you chills every time you hear that call and coming around the corner and everything. But as it pertains to pony athletics, how big is this? Because it was a huge deal. I mean, she went to her hometown of Afton, came back to the high school, the Parade of Champions, everything. So much coverage and everything. But how big is it for this high school to say, hey, we got a gold medalist?
Well, who wouldn't be proud of a state champion, right? Or an Olympic gold medalist. But anybody who, it was her gold medal race. If anybody watched her win the individual state championship for Stillwater her senior year, it was in similar fashion where she was trailing, and it was a mammoth comeback, and just as exciting as that was. And she's still doing that now, 8 years later, or whatever it is. And with all the other stuff, nobody's surprised. Anybody that knows her knows that she's just an inspirational person. She's all about getting kids active, and even if it's not Nordic skiing, she's just a great kid, and she's somebody that any community would be proud of, whether she was an Olympic gold medalist or not. She gives back, and she's just such an inspiration to so many.
It was great for her to come back here to Stillwater, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at the spring season, that miraculous run by this softball team. We'll be right back.
Ready, ready! Say hi!
And welcome back. The occupants of this field, that's the Stillwater Pony softball team, head coached by Bob Beadle, and what a season they had this year. Maybe not the regular season that Stillwater softball was looking for, but once the sections hit, they ran all the way through sections after losing the opening game, and then all the way through the state tournament in miraculous fashion to win the state championship for softball here in the state of Minnesota. We welcome back in Mike Pita to talk about this softball team. And Mike, this is just an unbelievable story. You know, what they were able to do after the regular season, through the sections, through the state tournament, and, you know, just how impressive in your mind was this run for the softball team this year?
Well, any state tournament run is impressive, but how they did it is just flat out amazing. They get the run rule on Buffalo in the semifinals. I know you were there for that one. Buffalo had one of the best sluggers in Class 4A. Forest Lake, the number 2 seed, they took care of them. And Park, a team who had swept them in the regular season and had run the tables at the home meeting earlier this year, then you knock them off. I talked to some writers about it. They said it may be an indicator of how, you know, some years are better than others in terms of strength of teams. That being said, you know, someone's got to win the trophy, and the Stillwater girls said, why not us? But I covered them a couple of times this year on the highlight trail, and there wasn't any indication that this team was going to rally and become, well, the underdog story of the spring.
And this is kind of a popular question, Mike, that we've been asking here. Can we expect the same amount of success from the softball team, you know, from going ahead towards next year, from 2018 to 2019?
I don't see why not. There's nothing like a state tournament championship that motivates your team. And as you noted, a lot of crossover athletes. Allison Benning plays basketball and found a rhythm on the mound towards section playoffs. And kind of like hockey, if you have a hot goalie, you can go far. If you have a hot pitcher, you can do the same thing on the diamond, whether it's softball or baseball. You mentioned Scalia, you know, Eddie, just a lot of names that, you know, rallied together. Now they're going to have that experience. I don't think anyone's going to be counting them out next year, but I think, yeah, we could see some big things on the softball diamond because, as you noted, a young core, they're all coming back, and you can imagine how ecstatic they're going to be knowing that their effort paid off when nobody thought they would even get out of sections.
Stu joins us once again, and Stu, softball won a miraculous state championship that they kind of came back after not doing so well in the regular season. But one team we kind of knew from the start, that baseball team, they were there, 2 Power Conference Division I athletes that were already committed in Will Frisch and Drew Gilbert in that state championship. 15 strikeouts from Drew Gilbert as Stillwater baseball, somewhat as an expectation, went on to win the state championship.
Yeah, it was a little strange the way it turned out, where you didn't think Drew would be pitching in the state finals. But you know what? Stillwater has very deep pitching, so they were going to be in good shape regardless. I don't think that was really a concern. Now, they weren't disappointed to trot him out there, but you know, it was just a good, tight game. It was what they set their goals maybe a little higher than they have in the past, and I think this was one of those years where, based on that really top level pitching, was a realistic goal for them.
We take a look at baseball. Frisch, who's committed to TCU. You got Gilbert, who's committed to Oregon State. They're juniors. They're coming back next season. Now they are losing some seniors. Schwerzler was a solid hitter in the outfield, among others, but is this a team that can repeat, you think, coming in next year?
Well, you know, you forget how unusual it is to have sophomores playing varsity baseball, and they had, you know, starting second baseman this year, John Kane, who played a lot. He's obviously gives you a good bat. He can pitch. He can play shortstop and do a lot of that stuff. And I think even the juniors would tell you how much the seniors help just from the intangible kind of things and the leadership and all that stuff. Cody Vensky, I don't think it's enough credit for you know what job he did behind the plate. He came in and got some really big outs. You know, you forget that, you know, the situation he walked into in even the section finals, and he got the win in the state quarterfinals and the state semifinals. And he's just a guy that everybody has faith in. He really started hitting the ball the second half of the season. And Schwerzler, I mean, he had made a big play out in left field, and just, you know, you don't win this with 2 guys, even 2 really outstanding pitchers. I mean, Stillwater's had drafted pitchers in the past who didn't get to this level, so you really do need to have everybody pitching in, and you're not going to just win it with 2 guys or 2 arms.
We'll wrap things up here in the spring season with both lacrosse team. Boys have been slowly but surely getting to that point where they can make a run towards state. Section final, I was on my toes. I really thought they were going to pull it off there against Matamidi, but what a job Tom Howe has done. Kind of slowly but surely, they're getting better year after year.
And they're young as well. They've got, you know, they certainly had some valuable seniors there, but a lot of their they're really talented younger players, and they're in a similar situation where they've got good numbers in the youth programs. And the program is it's been kind of a slow rise, but it's been steady and it's been consistent. So I don't know why they won't be in a position to continue knocking on that door.
The girls came just a little bit short to win their 10th straight Suburban East Conference title, but still ended up making the state, even though they didn't get the success they wanted to. But it's just same old for Rick Wright's team.
Yeah, it was a tough situation for them having to play Cretin, which is their big conference rival, in the first game of the season. I think Cretin had a game in prior to that, but that's fine. I think Cretin would happily trade places with Stillwater and winning a section championship and playing in the state tournament. I think Stillwater would have loved to have seen Cretin Durham Hall in the state tournament, but it doesn't always work out that way. But that's another program where it's almost a bigger story when they're not winning a conference or not winning a section, because they've done it. They've been around for about a decade and they've just seemed to do it every year.
Now, Stu, will wrap things up, of course, with the entire body of work, the fall, the winter, and spring. What are some moments that kind of stand out in your mind? Obviously, the occupants of this field is probably number one. That's mine, but what are some of your biggest moments here for Stillwater
it's funny because you talk about softball and everybody's going to say they're a Cinderella story and kind of fluky or whatever, but they beat everybody handily. I mean, 4 runs a game, I think, in the state tournament, and so that's not a fluke. That's just being a powerhouse. They just didn't leave any doubt. They beat teams. There was no error in scoring and run. I mean, they just really got hot and beat teams. But yeah, I think 15 section championships for pony teams this year.
Unbelievable.
And 2 of the teams that didn't win section titles, boys cross country and boys Nordic skiing, were state runner-ups. I mean, it's really been a phenomenal year, and that just you look at all the coaches that they've got in place, and you look at the facilities around here, and it takes a commitment. And I don't think you can credit the facilities yet for all these because they haven't had them very long, but it's that kind of commitment just from the community. I mean, they value sports and everything that does for kids, and so that this is what happens. And it doesn't happen every year.
Exactly. We'll see if they can repeat it, at least some of the success, kind of get back there next year. Stu, I appreciate you braving the elements out here for our show.
Fun. Yeah, no, it was great.
And we'll see you around here in the future.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, guys.
And when we come back, we're going to wrap everything up. From fall, winter, spring, we're going to bring back Mike Peden one last time to wrap up Ponies All Access for this academic year. Stick around. An extraordinary year for everybody on campus here at Stillwater Area High School, and more to come, I'm sure, in the coming years. We welcome back in Mike Peden for one last time. Mike, you've done so much stuff for us this year. Thank you for doing everything. We'll start off with that. Mike, how impressive was this athletic department as a whole this very season?
Well, Ted, as a matter of fact, I have been here for every episode of Ponies All Access so far, and I'm wondering if I can apply to be the co-host next year.
We'll make sure we talk to management about
that. All right, I'll send in the application. This is a really impressive year for Stillwater athletics. When you think of powerhouses, you tend to think of the Lake Conference, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Edina, Hopkins, the whole swath, Wayzata, the last one, because they tend to be the most successful across all sports. But Stillwater demonstrated the power of the Suburban East. Volleyball got to state. Couldn't get through the first round, the quarterfinals, but they had an impressive year. You look at all of the championships won in the winter, skiing, and then you see what happened here in the spring, the miracle run of Stillwater softball, the impressive run for Stillwater baseball getting to states, and then the soccer team finishing second after winning the previous year, if I recall. When you look across the board, that effort, that recognition does not go unnoticed, and it's been a lot of fun getting to be on the Stillwater beat and getting a chance to see just how much talent there is in the St. Croix Valley.
Mike, you're going to be back for us, and we appreciate that next season covering Stillwater Area High School sports. Did a great job this year. I'm sure will continue that success going here into the next season. Mike, what excites you the most about being a part of the Stillwater community, being a part of the VAC TV crew coming here next season?
How can I answer that question when you've got all of these different sports? I think the most exciting thing for me is getting a chance to connect myself with the St. Croix Valley area, the Stillwater community. I went to a lot of the Stillwater basketball games, and the parents found me and we would chat it up. But I'm really excited to get a taste of some of the other teams now that we've got this sports operation going. You know, Stillwater's boys soccer, they'll be looking to earn their comeuppance after falling short to Wayzata in the 2A boys championship last year. You know, the Stillwater girls had a great year. I'm sure they would love to punctuate it with a trip to state. And volleyball, speaking of the fall sports, they'll be coming up in a couple of months. You know, there are a lot of questions with that team. How are they going to respond after losing a lot of their seniors, like Rachel Houle? So I'm really excited to get this fall slate going, and I'm excited to get my taste of home games and going on the road. I'm really looking forward to becoming a part of this Stillwater community over the next school year.
All right, thanks, Mike. We'll make sure we get back to you about that application.
All right, I'm going to go back to my other job here at Target Field now.
Well, what a year it was for Stillwater area high school sports. What a year it was for all of us here at VAC TV and covering all sports, any sports, from live broadcasts to highlights to the feature stories here on Ponies All Access. It was quite the year, a tremendous year. We got to do a one-on-one interview with Jesse Diggins, got to cover all of the great teams here. A tremendous year. Let's keep that success going, Pony Nation. And with that, this is it for this academic year of Ponies All Access. We'll be back in August before the fall sports begin. Make sure you take a look at that. We'll see you in August.
The 30, and it's Wade.